All right. Well, happy World IP Day week, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Keith Cooperschmidt. I am the CEO of the Copyright Alliance. I want to welcome you all here. For those of you who know the Copyright Alliance, you know that we are dedicated to advocating policies that promote and preserve the value of copyright and to protecting the rights of creators and innovators. And every year on the week of April 26th, April 26th is World IP Day. So every year on this week, we get to celebrate the importance and the value of copyright law. And for almost 10 years now, the Copyright Alliance has been celebrating World IP Day with various discussions of topics relating to the importance of copyright. And we've had some great panels during those times. And once again, I am very confident that this year we will probably outdo ourselves because we have a really exceptional panel lined up this year. And to kick things off, I am very thrilled to be able to introduce Miriam Lord, who's with us today. Miriam is the Associate Register of Copyrights and Director of Public Information and Education for the U.S. Copyright Office. I've worked with her quite a bit since she's been at the office, and I can tell you she is doing an absolutely amazing job running PIA and has been an absolute pleasure to work with. Before joining the office, Miriam was director of the Global Intellectual Property Academy at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, providing domestic and international IP capacity building and technical assistance for education policies and programs. She's also served as co-lead of the Department of Commerce's Equity Council's Gender Committee. And before that, she was also a director of the Philadelphia Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. So she knows a little bit about the type of things we're going to be talking about today. So let me turn things over to Miriam, who's going to say a few words and then introduce our moderator. So Miriam, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Keith. And I want to thank the Copyright Alliance for the invitation again, of course, and all the speakers in advance for all of your valuable contributions as we celebrate World IP Day. This year's theme is IP as a solution to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, so this is quite a theme that the World IP Organization, or WIPO, has set up for us all to talk about this year. At the U.S. Copyright Office, we're interpreting this theme to be an opportunity to celebrate the many ways that the copyright system helps the creative system work for the benefit of everyone. So, for example, the copyright system is highly relevant for Goal 8 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is supporting decent work and economic growth, as well as Goal 4, which is quality education, given the fact that copyright is so relevant to both the production and distribution of educational materials, and the importance of educating our own creative public. Of course, we're always looking to contribute to Goal 17, which is partnership to reach all of our goals. And in that capacity, the office stands ready to both help creators and users navigate the copyright system. Of course, together with educators and organizers in the private sector like today. So please contact the office. Just open invitation for anybody on the call anytime through copyright.gov. Any questions and for resources that we can provide you. So I don't want to hold you up. You have an amazing panel. It's my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today, Maribel Smith. She is an award-winning video and podcast producer and the co-founder of the creative network BIPOC Podcast Creators. So over to you, Maribel.
Thank you so much, Miriam. It's a pleasure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is a great day, and I'm very excited. And I feel very privileged to be here moderating this amazing panel of experts. My name is Maribel Smith, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists today. So we have with us Bijou Mgbojikwe. She's the Senior Policy Counsel at Entertainment Software Association. We also have Eric Schwartz. He's a partner at Mitchell, Silberberg, and Knupp, LLP, and founding chair at the National Film Preservation Foundation. We also have Mary Rasenberger, CEO of the Authors Guild, and of course, Taura Stinson, Academy Award nominated songwriter, composer, and producer. Please welcome all of these wonderful panelists. I wish we could hear the clapping, but we'll just imagine that is happening. All right, so without further ado, I want to get into our first question because everyone that's joining us today, I'm sure is excited to hear what you all have to say about copyright and world IP and all of the things that impact creators today. And to start us off, I'm going to ask Mary and Eric to answer this, but we'll start with Mary. For the purpose of today's discussion, we are defining sustainability as copyright protection. What does sustainability mean to your organization and the creative community that it represents?
Love the question about sustainability and thinking about copyright in terms of sustainability, because it's exactly what copyright does if it's working as it should. It provides a sustainable environment for authors and other creators to create and to have sustainable professions. There are some who like to think of copyright as an incentive to create a particular work or publish a particular work, but that is not how copyright works in practice, or indeed was ever intended to work. If you even go back to the first copyright law, the Statute of Anne in UK in 1710, or the US copyright law in 1790, copyright was understood as a way to give authors the ability to sustain their livelihood as authors. So they were not dependent on patrons, government, or even stationers' monopoly, which they had in the UK. Copyright's a way of democratizing writing and other creative work. And it does this by creating an ecosystem where talented young writers and other creators can see a future for themselves because those professions exist. They study for these future professions as youngsters often, and certainly in higher education. And they train so they can make it in those professions one day. And when they start out, that ecosystem provides, or at least it did until the entry of AI, the ecosystem should provide entry-level jobs that help them support themselves while they're trying to make it. And then once they're published, they need to be able to keep earning money from writing or publishing to stay in the profession, or needless to say, they have to move into other professions, and they usually write a lot less or not at all. The ecosystem that copyright creates also sustains people and companies willing to invest in the businesses to publish and distribute and otherwise assist creators to disseminate their work and allow them to earn some income. In the literary world, we have publishers, distributors, wholesalers, bookstores, online retailers, agents, publicists, freelance editors, book coaches, who are all part of this ecosystem. Without copyright, no one would invest in those supporting businesses. Publishers would not invest in authors. There are so many ways to publish today, which is wonderful, including there's a very robust self-publishing industry. But many of the books that provide the most to society in terms of the goals of copyright, which is to the progress of the arts and sciences, those books are still published by some of the top traditional publishers, and that's because those publishers can provide advances to authors so they can take time off their jobs and devote themselves to writing a great book, which often takes several years, at least full time. Authors live off those advances while they're writing those books, or they use them to cover research costs, which can be high. And without that kind of investment, which copyright supports, those kind of books would not be written. Indeed, without copyright, this whole system falls apart because anyone could republish a book once it's out. So neither the author nor the original publisher can recoup their costs and get paid fairly, and nor would anybody else engage in this particular industry. It's important to remember that copyrights and patents are the only rights that the founders put in the Constitution. And they did it because they understood that the US would never amount to much if we did not have our own authors. Noah Webster was one of the early advancers of copyrights in the US. He was a school teacher, and he wrote the first American grammar for his students and then published it. And once it was printed, every other printer was soon publishing it as well. And he earned nothing from this book he spent years writing. So he lobbied the colonies and then Congress to pass copyright law. And from that, after there was a copyright law, he was able to take the time to write the first American dictionary, which is Webster's. And before the copyright law, few people don't realize this, we had only like a few, like literally 2 or 3 American written published books in this country. After copyright law was passed, we very soon had a flourishing literary culture. And sadly, copyright in books has been under attack in the last decade and a half, and we are seeing its impact on the sustainability of the profession. And in part because books are so important to learning and culture, many argue we need broader access, online access to books, and free online access to books. And we obviously support the need for everyone to be able to access books, but we can't do that without looking at the sustainability of the supply side. That is, how do these books get written? How do they get out into the world? Who pays for that? Our most recent survey found, we survey authors, we do massive surveys of at least 5,000 authors every 5 years. And our most recent one looked at 2022. The median income for authors was $20,000 a year from all types of writing sources, only $10,000 a year from books. And that was down, consistent with 5 years earlier, in terms of just the straight dollar amount, but it was down 42% from 2009. And there are various reasons for that, including monopolization in publishing and retail. But a huge part of it is the everything wants to be free spirit, and piracy. They've certainly had a big role. So we've already seen that we've lost many great or potential, great writers and books, and we will lose more. It's very difficult for young people to get into this profession today. So anyway, I'll just finish by saying I love framing copyright as sustainability because that is exactly how policymakers need to think about it.
Thank you so much, Mary. Eric, you represent a filmmaking or the filmmaking side, and there are many other forms of content creation out there that is important to talk about sustainability in that arenas as well. Can you tell us how your organization looks at sustainability and the community you represent?
Sure. Well, thank you, Maribel, and thank the Copyright Alliance. First of all, there's nothing that Mary has said that I disagree with, not a word. But I took a completely different tact and was asked essentially a different question. First of all, I'm just here representing myself, not the firm and not the Film Preservation Foundation. But I took the word sustainability literally. You look at 2 Supreme Court cases, Harper and Rowe, which said that copyright supplies the economic incentive to create and disseminate ideas. And then Justice Ginsburg, that was 1985. 2012, Justice Ginsburg in the Golan Supreme Court case, citing Harper, again says that copyright purpose is to induce the creation of new works or the further dissemination of existing works. And on that further dissemination, taking the word sustainability literally means how well have we retained the physical copies that creators have created. And I was going to use the film industry and films just to illustrate the relationship of copyright protection and copyright incentives and sustainability. Mostly it's a cautionary tale because in the first century of the film industry, there's been more than a problematic history. In 1988, the Library of Congress helped create the National Film Preservation Board, a study group within the library. In 1993, and I helped organize a study at the time of the state of film preservation in the United States. And these are problems that exist in every other country, but just in the US. We had hearings in Los Angeles and DC and New York, and it was an open mic. Anyone who wanted to talk about technical issues, legal issues, financial issues of sustaining, that is, retaining the physical material. And after the study was completed, the board created what was called a national plan to address these problems. And one of the things that was created as a result of the national plan was the National Film Preservation Foundation, a 501c3, to fill a niche to preserve orphan films. But what did the 1993 study find? 50% of the feature films that were made before 1950, half of the films in the first essentially half century of an industry were totally gone, completely gone. and that's feature films. 80% in the silent era. That's the pre-1928 era. It also found on the technical side that there were ways to properly store, temperature, humidity control, and retain film material. But this loss, there were a lot of players in the loss, the copyright owners, but also archives, Library of Congress. I mean, the Museum of Modern Art started collecting films in the 1930s, but only art films. So very selective list of titles. The Library of Congress and the Copyright Office didn't retain its deposit copies for dozens of years. And the reason was there was no commercial market, no post-theatrical commercial market, right? Films showed in a theater and there was nothing else until the 1950s. So now you have your commercial incentive. And then in the 1980s, you have the home video market to retain this material. So while there's sort of a sad story in the first half century, I would say, there have certainly been significant improvements in especially the last 30 years. And the interesting part about it is a cooperative role. The rights holders have certainly had the incentives for post-theatrical markets, right? The major studios to retain their materials, to store them properly, to spend money on preservation and the expensive restorations. But so too have the archives, who have in many ways been the heroes of the non-commercial material. I'm talking the largest ones: Library of Congress, Museum of Modern Art, George Eastman Museum, UCLA, and the Academy. Those are the 5 largest archives in the United States. And so these are problems that persist. These are not things that were, everything's been fixed and we move on. For older films, first of all, the pre-1950s, what does remain, there are very expensive costs of retaining the material, which rights holders have helped to sustain with the archives. So there's been a lot of cooperation between the archives, studios, film collectors, those who retain the only copies of some of these titles. There have been, money given by rights holders to transfer and preserve films, but also a lot of it has been public money in these public archives doing that. But it's also a new problem. A few years ago, the Academy of Motion Pictures did a study and they found that preserving digital material is actually more expensive than retention of film material, because you have to migrate the material every few years, right? Like any digital file, and it's really expensive. So the conclusion on sustainability is certainly improvements in the last half century, certainly in the last 30 years, a more cooperative undertaking, but there's a lot more work to be done. And that's sort of my view of sustainability, as I said, Maribel, taking a very, very literal view of it and very different response than the economic sustainability for individual creators or collective, rights holders like studios and the like. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric. I love that we're talking about both sides of it, the literal sense and then the economic sense. And it's great because it's important to preserve all of that work. I want to turn a little bit to the creator side and those who defend the creator side of things, to Taura and Bijou. How do stronger copyright protections impact the sustainability and empowerment of the creative community, whether it's in your industry or specifically, or the creative community as a whole? Taura, do you want to go first?
Hi, sure. So I just want to say, yeah, definitely from a creative side, it's a little bit less, I'll probably use up a little less time because it's just about protection and legacy for us. That's what it's about. Went over time, and also I'm an author. So Mary, I really appreciated every word you said and was taking notes and all, for both of you, Eric. But as music continually evolves, the copyrights remain. That's just it. So while I was a kid who was obsessed with copywriting as a songwriter. I would have my works of I think it was 30, you could put I would do all my poems in a set and then just and copyright them. And I'm happy that my mother gave me that that task to do one summer. Just like, hey, if you're writing all these things, like, how are you going to protect yourself? And I think that's a question that's being missed these days to songwriters, to poets, to all holders of IP, to that are in this generation, that you're almost like holding yourself open for the line of fire when you don't protect yourself. So when you have today as a songwriter, one of the things that we talk about all the time, one of the topics of discussion is there are like, it could be one song, 2 minutes, 20 seconds with 95 writers on it, you know, and people always ask me and like different, just in conversation, like, so how do you protect yourself against that? I know that copyright protects against that. Because once if I sit down and I write a song, and I write a song with myself, or I write a song with one collaborator or two, and you copyright it, then it has a paper trail. It's basically like a bulletproof vest, a proverbial, for against all of the people that are coming to come for your copyright when you have this hit song. So I say, but overall, the copyright protections can provide important benefits for songwriters, especially what I just described, but also, I would just say what's important is protection and legacy, because I can go on, and I think that it gets lost sometimes for creatives. Like, should I be doing it? Does it make sense to copyright when you could just have the stamp from your Pro Tools or your, you know, people have that, they think that oftentimes, but when you go to court, if you have a Pro Tools date stamp against a copyright, I think, you know, we know who will win. So it's good to recondition creatives to consider copyrights. And it's sustainable. Yes, in the long run, it's going to prove positive for all of us in our community.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, of course.
Bijou, what do you think? What are your thoughts around this?
Sure. Thanks, Maribel. And I want to also thank Copyright Alliance for letting me be on this panel. So I'm just going to talk just generally about video games and about creators. ESA represents the US video game industry, and I'll just read some numbers on the economic impact of games in the United States. In 2022, total consumer spend on video games was $56.6 billion, $6.6 billion on consoles, $47 billion on content, and $2.5 billion on accessories, hardware accessories. So that just shows the reach of video games here in the US. But we wouldn't be really anywhere without the Copyright Act and several parts of the Copyright Act. And so that's why we are a big believer in strong copyright protection and enforcement. So, so we believe that, stronger copyright protection definitely supports sustainability and empowerment of the creative community by facilitating digital distribution, which we take for granted now, but wasn't always the case decades ago, as well as facilitating investment through the power of licensing. Just talking about licensing, right now video games are having a huge cultural moment. They've always been a cultural force, but they've been in the background. But now, for example, the Super Mario Brothers movies last year grossed over $1 billion, and that was a huge surprise because that adaptation hasn't really gone well in the past. HBO Max's The Last of Us was also adapted from a video game, and TV series Fallout on Amazon was just renewed for the second season because it was a hit amongst viewers and critics. So those are standout examples from, huge studios, but that ability to own those rights provided for you in the Copyright Act and to exercise it
and to protect your creative content also applies to individual creators. And you can also, reap some of those similar benefits: the right to display, the right to distribute your works, the right to decide who you're granting licenses to and what they can do with it. And also the ability to enforce content protection is incredibly important for our members here at ESA, and we have a robust content protection program that focuses on links, disrupting links to infringing video game content, stopping the sale and distribution of counterfeit video game consoles, etc. I had mentioned digital distribution. So for us, the key statute is Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA, that is of key importance to video games because it prohibits the circumvention of the technical measures that protect game content, but the console ecosystem on which game content relies. You can use your consoles to listen to music, to watch movies as well. So those sort of content partners of our members also rely on the security of the console and other platforms as well, including mobile, including platforms, including PC. And that support, that protection afforded by Section 1201 allows creators to be confident when they put their works out on the web for others to interact with and to consume, that it wouldn't be immediately affected by piracy. Because when it is, it's hard to see revenue from years of effort. I mean, it takes years to produce a AAA video game, and it can take hundreds of millions of dollars, and you have lots of people working on it: coders, musicians, writers, artists, engineers, a whole bunch of people.
Thank you so much. I feel like I'm learning a lot, and I'm really excited to continue this discussion. I also wanted to let everybody know in the audience that we will be answering questions at the end of the presentation or at the end of this discussion. So please stick around for that. I see that people are putting in their questions in the Q&A. So just type those in the Q&A, and we will try to get to all your questions at the end. But now I want to turn the conversation to something a little bit different, but also incredibly important. And that is diversity. It says here diversity, equity, and inclusion, but honestly, I'm so tired of hearing those words thrown around over the last few years that I think I'd like to try something a little bit different. So we already know that diversity, equity, and inclusion are very important. We already know that diversity in everything that we do is crucial, especially in the creative works that we put out and that we protect. Let's talk instead about the things that we can do to lower the barrier of entry into the ability to creators of color, for example, in this situation, to create and protect their work, to create that sustainability for people of color who are in the creative fields. I'd love to start with you, Taura, as an artist, as a songwriter and author. Tell me a little bit about maybe like a barrier that you have had to deal with as a person of color in the creative industry and how you've been able to overcome that to continue sustaining your work through copyright. Like, how does that play into what you do? Because you mentioned a little bit of it, of what your mom taught you, but can you go a little deeper?
I mean, I think it's kind of blanketed. It's not necessarily just through copyright, because you have to jump through every hoop that there is to sometimes just to be able to have a speck of you seen. But I think the biggest thing that I could offer, I will say that Laura Cartman, she's a mentor and a friend. She is also a Oscar nominated composer. She was one of the governors for the music branch at the Academy. She started this ecosystem of women supporting women when I joined the Academy, I believe in 2016. But ahead of that, I worked with her on just learning about what this is, about specifically D&I, like how can I get my feet wet, dirty, whatever, to be able to reach back and pull another person of color forward, to pull back another woman, to pull another woman forward, because it's not just about, oftentimes people think diversity and inclusion is just about people of color, but it's about women, and it's about us like being like so far, like being paid so far less, that doesn't stop in music. We're still fighting for, as songwriters, to even get fees to be paid to us, because historically these male producers are getting paid and we're waiting for our royalty checks. Not me, because you have to stand up for yourself at some point and say, you know what, I'm just going to become a personal assistant for a while or wait tables. I did the former, because you have to stand up for yourself and just realize that this is not going to change unless we take chances on ourselves and take big stances. And another thing that's really important is getting involved. So when Laura when she started, I think it was like 2020, we had like an initiative at the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, where we wanted to have, by 2020, like have more diverse and inclusivity within the Academy. We reached that goal. And now with the AWFC, which is the Alliance of Women Film Composers, which I'm on the board of, we are now looking for parity by 2030. So these things, like, we have to make goals. We have to take stances and talk about the ridiculous things that are going on, like Red Lobster hiring AI to do a commercial recently. That's taking food out of the mouths of composers as a whole. But think about women, think about people of color. We're already being pushed back from the table. So the idea is for us to create our own tables and invite everyone to come and sit at it, because what our view as artists should mirror the view of the world. The view of the world isn't just a white man, isn't just like a woman that are sitting on the other side of the room and not able to come and join a table. It's all of us at the table together, and numbers that make sense and mirror the world. So in terms of copyright, I think making an inclusive environment for people to even feel or be able to economically, because some people can't even afford a copyright. So maybe sometimes we should, as people who can, like, maybe sponsor a copyright, be able to, that's just an idea that I love right now. I don't know how we can bring that together, but there are girls in indigenous parts of the world who can't even copyright right now, who have the best poem or song or art piece. So I don't know. As you can see, I'm very passionate about this. But I digress. I just think it's really important, more than anything, for us to just reach back and pull forward. That's the most important thing.
That's true. Reach back and pull forward. And I know that somebody commented about, well, what about age diversity? And that's important too. I think diversity is all encompassing of many things: viewpoints, age, many factors, right? Experiences. And Bijou, real quick, I just wanted to turn to you to talk about, like, what is your organization doing to kind of sustain the efforts for diversity in the video, in the video game industry?
Sure, thanks, Maribel. First, I'll just say that DE&I is very important, not just to ESA members, but just to anybody who wants to make games. Over 3 billion people in the world play video games specifically. And most of those people are located outside of the United States. So if you really want to grow your audience and the reach of your game, your player base, it's important to seek out storylines, new narratives, and reflect new characters in your works that will appeal to a more diverse audience. I think Taura mentioned two things that I'd like to pick up on. One was ecosystems and education. So video games has, sort of almost a high barrier to entry, especially because of sort of coding and engineering and science and mathematics. So ESA through ESA Foundation, so it's sort of nonprofit arm, supports sort of all types of endeavors that help train the next generation of creators, those who would be interested in video games. So they support programs that harness the power of video games to benefit students, schools, and charities, sort of with the ultimate goal of sort of setting students to a path of like a fruitful career and a fulfilling career. So we also believe in sort of showcasing the unique talents and skills and ideas. For example, we have a scholarship. And so ESA Foundation, for many years, since 2007, has been providing financial support for women and minority students across the United States. They've awarded 450 scholarships to those working towards a degree in computer science and video game and sort of arts and sciences degrees, which are sort of increasing throughout the US because it's almost like a niche path. So sometimes it's hard to find your way there. There was a recent study that said that girls who play video games when they're younger tend to gravitate towards video games when they're older, and they tend to have more of an interest in sort of science and technology and mathematics. So we're very interested in sort of pushing younger people towards that path, and they do that through a form that really captures their imagination, which is video games.
And that's really cool because now we know that there are also careers happening from video games, which is, blows your mind. I think sometimes it's like, wow, I can't believe that's a career now. But it's cool. And thank you so much for that, for your input on that. I wanted to mention that the Copyright Alliance does have an amazing program called the IPDC, and it does support BIPOC creators in putting their work in the copyright system. So it's really great, and I encourage people to check it out because it is a step in the right direction, absolutely. And the Copyright Alliance, like, kudos to everybody there, because that is a great program. Yeah, I know. Like I said, if we could hear the clapping, that would be awesome. Taura, another question for you. How has your career changed over the last 5 years, and where do you see it going? This is a two-part question, by the way. As you're growing as an artist or continue to develop, how do both copyright and AI developments impact the protection of your works?
It's scary. I mean, in the last 5 years, I have like incremental growth that I'm proud of. I have, and when I say incremental, I mean over the last 30 years, it's been, like, oh, okay, I started off and I was writing songs for, R&B and pop artists. And I realized that I had other parts of me that wanted to speak. And how can I do that? Like being this confused girl who grew up with 1 foot in BET and 1 foot in MTV. How do I like express both of those parts of me? And film was the answer, because it allows me to be able to write songs for all kinds of genres, one day I'm writing a song for Steven Tyler, one day I'm writing a song for Mary J. Blige, and I love that. And over the last 5, and I also had to take a break. Like I said, I wasn't kidding. I did take a break and to like refocus and center and figure out like how to get there to that. So don't ever think that if you're in a space where you're figuring things out, that you're lost. Because, in that space is where you find yourself often. So I took a break, and then I recentered, refocused, and I started to write music for film and TV. And it's funny because I measure it every 5 years. And so I'm like ending a 5-year cycle. I have a great movie coming out with 3 songs with Brittany Howard. Really, really excited about that. But over the years, it has changed in the best way. But I think it's because of the camaraderie that I have with my female composers, with all the different affinity groups that I'm a part of. It's a community that feeds you creatively, and then also in the other ways when you just need someone to help you lift you up. And I'm not as fancy as these other people because I might have forgot the rest of your question. So
It's okay. It's okay. You did a really good job taking us there. It's, we wanted to know about like how it's affected your career, your growth, and particularly to AI. Like, what kind of impact is that having for
See,
you?
it's hard to talk about AI because I could like keep us here all day because I think it's just so, I mean, there are obviously in music, there are ways that it's useful. There are, we have Pro Tools and all these different necessary components of music that are, basically AI derived, and that's fine. And we've been using them forever. And even if say you are a songwriter and you wanted to use AI to enhance your personal development process, that's your choice. But when we're talking about these huge companies hiring AI instead of people, like when we have to like go to a hashtag like made by a human, that's so disgusting to me, like the idea that we even have to like consider that with all that we're up against as women, as people of color, now we have to be against soulless algorithms. And so yeah, it's very scary, and I'm hoping to be a part of whatever fight that needs to happen, because again, I'm not opposed to if whatever you want to do for your own creative process, but when it comes to a writer who's writing for a TV show who has a deep fake algorithm that's trained to, this data set is trained by a writer that is a living soul, that is just, to me, it just seems like it's supposed, isn't it just like black and white? Isn't it clear? But I guess not, because it's happening. So the future of AI, I think, it's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's a complicated topic and a complicated way to give an answer. And that actually leads me to our next question for Mary, which I'm sure you have a lot to say about this. We'll try to say it in a quick way, but can you tell us about how authors are being impacted by AI and might be in the future, and what the creative community, I would say the creative community as a whole, might do about it?
Thank you. And I agree with everything that Taura said. AI is actually an existential threat. And I do not like hyperbole. I don't use hyperbole, but it really is in this case if we don't set up some guardrails. The whole business of writing is at risk. And it's not because people will want to read AI generated books instead of human ones. I don't think they will, but because of the overall impact it's going to have on the business. And the problem is that the AI generated books threaten to flood the marketplace for human written books to the point where every book loses value. Publishers earn less on human authored books, and so they publish fewer books, they publish for your mid list, and they pay less, and we just see more and more so-called celebrity written books and self-help books, because that's, and those will be AI generated because they're really easy to generate with AI. But the books and articles, just to take a step back, books and articles serve as the most important ingredient of generative AI for text, which are called large language models or LLMs. And it's because they have the highest quality of language use, which is exactly what generative AI, high quality generative AI, is trying to mimic. And as I said before, writers put massive amount of work, training, expertise into those works, their art, and the outputs of the AI would be junk without them. That training was done without permission, without compensation, and very importantly, without control over the types of uses that can be made with these AI systems. The control that would come with licensing, which AI companies chose not to pursue, allows you to put conditions on the use. And instead, the AI companies use books that they downloaded from pirate ebook sites. So these AI systems are being used already to generate material that competes directly with writers' works, sometimes by mimicking their work or taking their identities, and that siphons off income from authors. We're not seeing large sums of money being siphoned off yet, but that will likely come. We are seeing an explosion of AI-generated copycat books on Amazon and other ebook retail platforms. These are biographies, workbooks, or summaries that are AI-generated, and they have one intent only, and that's to steal sales from the real book. These are scammers who generate these books and put them up. They manage to get them posted right next to, and sometimes even above, the real human written book on Amazon. And they get bought by mistake by people who are looking for the author's real book. This is only the beginning, I'm sorry to say, because with AI improvements like GPT Turbo, anyone now can spit out decent text of up to 300 pages. And we're all seeing how generative AI just keeps improving and improving with every iteration, to the point where it gets harder to distinguish, for a human to distinguish AI generated from human. Even though, to reiterate something that Taura said, it is soulless. I think you called it, soulless algorithms. Anything generated by AI is by definition without art. It's not new, it's derivative, because it's just taking what it was trained on and remixing it in a very complex way. There's nothing new. There's nothing truly original in anything that's generated by AI. So authors, as I said before, they spend years writing books only to have their content mashed up by AI, and seeing this on Amazon. For instance, Stephanie Land, I don't know if you remember, she wrote the book Made, and there was a TV series based on it. Really amazing book. It was a memoir. She recently published a new memoir called Class, and within a day or two, there were half a dozen workbooks, summaries, and biographies on Amazon, and several on Barnes & Noble as well. So we asked Amazon on her behalf to take them down, and they did, because they have a standard, they have quality standards. They're not super high, but they do. With the early AI generated books, they were able to say these are crap, they don't meet our quality standards, they took them down. But there was one of the books, they said, well, this did not violate our quality standards, so we've left it up. And I looked at it. It was a biography. Clearly, somebody had taken the memoir, fed it into an AI system, and prompted it to turn the memoir into a biography. So I wrote back to Amazon. I said, hello, it does infringe your policies. It infringes the policy against copyright infringement, because it is actually infringing. But the point is, they couldn't tell from looking at it that it was AI generated. Jane Friedman, she's a consultant for authors, but very, very well known in the field. She writes blogs, really, because amazing, helpful advice. And she, several months ago, found 5 books written by Jane Friedman on Amazon that were AI generated, clearly, based on her blogs. And we did manage to get those taken down too. But as you can see, you have to be very vigilant about it. Every one of our board members who's had a new book come out in the last couple months has experienced the same thing, including the president of our foundation, Maria Rana. She just had a new book that she spent years writing called Latino Land. An amazing book. It's a survey of all the Latinx people in this country and history. And she had several copycat books posted alongside her book the week it came out. So we were able to get those out. We can help those who come to us for now, as long as these books look like they're clearly AI generated and a low quality. But there are many who don't know that those books are even up. And so as long as they're up, they steal sales. And this is only the beginning. There will be an explosion before long of these AI books. The publishers and authors fear that the next John Grisham, the next Nora Roberts will be AI generated and sold in competition with human authored books. So there is real concern throughout the industry. And I also want to add that I said before that authors only earn half of their living from books, and the other half is things from like journalism, coaching, editing, that sort of thing. Writers are already losing that much needed supplemented income from jobs like copywriting and journalism to AI. Those are some of the first jobs that have been taken by AI. And there was a recent study done that traced the loss of freelance jobs due to AI and surveyed just a few months, found that the greatest losers by far are writers, with a 33% drop in the number of freelance jobs available in just several months. So that's to say we are already seeing the impact. So we're trying to fight back to ensure the sustainability of our literary culture, but it's not easy. And just a couple of things that we're trying to do is we brought a class action lawsuit with 17 authors against OpenAI and Microsoft about GPT. It's, going to be a fair use case. And we have several asked to Congress and we're actually working currently on several different pieces of legislation for each of these issues. The first is we want AI generated content to be labeled as AI generated content. We don't want humans to have to say, oh, this is human generated, to your point, Taura. Consumers need to know what's AI generated. They have a right to know. So they know what they're buying. And we need transparency in training data. AI companies should be required to say, this is what I trained on. One, so we understand the bias that's in that AI system, but also so we know if it's been trained on our works. That's only fair. And then, of course, if we lose these AI training cases, the fair use cases, on some faulty notion of fair use and its purpose, because personally, what the purpose of copyright and fair use is decidedly not to allow entire creative fields to be decimated. But if we were to lose those cases, we will need Congress to step in. We've had many discussions with them about that to clarify that this kind of training on professionally created works that have value and commercial value is not fair use under copyright law. And we're looking at a lot of ways to do that. And then last, I'll finish. We do probably need the ability to collectively license and negotiate with AI companies, because writers are their own copyright. They own their own copyrights but have no bargaining power vis-a-vis the big AI companies.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's so important to put the onus on these AI companies and instead of putting it on the consumers or on the creators. I think that's such a good point. Thank you so much, Mary. In the interest of saving time, I'm going to jump right into another question for you, Bijou. A little different here, but what has the video game industry done to, quote, go green? And why do you think that's important?
Thanks, Maribel. I know that we have little time left, so I will just quickly say that ESA members have done quite a bit on sort of reducing the industry's impact on the environment, from energy efficiency for hardware to hardware recycling, to partnering with governments around the world and with the United Nations on several issues. I'll start with recycling. So while video game consoles and hardware tend to have significant nostalgic value for players, unlike the majority of consumer electronics, ESA console makers, that would be Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony, offer many ways to recycle used hardware, from courtesy-free take-back programs to donation refurbishment, and they also manage sort of end-of-life recycling and handling for products in compliance with applicable laws depending on their jurisdiction. On energy efficiency, for example, there's reduced sort of power consumption for consoles depending on if they're in rest mode, reduce use of plastics, use of recycled plastics, and using sort of paper instead of plastic. So in terms of packaging, they are, those three console makers I mentioned, they're signatories to the European Union Games Console Voluntary Agreement, where and this has been recognized by the European Union, and they pledged to work together to improve sort of the energy and resource efficiency of game consoles, including mandatory time limits for automatic power downs, commitments to improve recycling, and commitments to provide sort of out of warranty repair service, and to provide users information for how to repair their product. Some of our members have also joined the UN's Playing for the Planet Alliance. So that was an initiative that was launched as part of the UN Secretary General's Climate Action Summit in September 2019. And the Alliance is a consortium of video game companies formally committed to taking action on climate change. So for example, last year, Sony PlayStation pioneered a virtual reality app called Climate Station in collaboration with the UN's Environment Program, UNEP. So it allows people to view, interact, and understand complex climate data to raise awareness about climate change. And then also last year, PlayStation sent notices and messages to gamers to support the UN's Play for Forest campaign, leading to sort of additional signatures to pledge to protecting our planet's forests. I think all these efforts are important because of the industry's reach, which is really powered by copyright protection, and through the industry, as well as the creators, drive creativity, ideas. Members of the creative community can not only express themselves through the games and the apps that they make, but they can also sort of do something for their planet and show support for causes that are really important to them.
Eric, on our last question here before we get to the Q&A, and thank you everybody for sticking around and being patient with us today. You already kind of gave us a lot about why preserving film is important, what has been done, a little bit of what has been done, but why is it important for the future of the film industry to preserve film heritage and history?
Well, thank you, Maribel. And yeah, I'll be brief. Well, let me bring the conversation sort of full circle to some of the things. I mean, Taura, Bijou, we're talking about the necessity for a copyright system that's inclusive, right, for creators. In the film preservation world, it's equally important to preserve, to tell the fuller picture of the US story, to preserve a lot of independent and other films. The National Film Preservation Foundation was created in 1997 because the #1 recommendation of the then study was if feature films, so major studio material, had been lost at a 50% rate in the first half century, then and there was no commercial incentive for some other titles, right? They had either gone public domain or there just wasn't a larger sustaining commercial market. There was the necessity to create an organization to focus on what we called orphan films, those without a commercial benefactor. And that's true going backwards. It's true going forwards. Because if commerce was the incentive for copyright owners to sustain their own material, if something has a small or no commercial market, someone else has to do that. And that's what the foundation has done for 30 years. Since I helped start this in '97 as a 501c3, we've raised and distributed $29 million and saved over about 2,700 films and over 300 institutions in all 50 states. And these are, to give some examples, these are culturally and historically important films. I mean, I can go backwards and answer your question. The early pioneers of film were women. Mabel Normand was 19, 100 years ago, had her own production company at 19. Lois Weber made 200 films before World War II, right? In 1916, she made a film that's 108 years ago about unwanted pregnancies. Women were telling their own stories. Black filmmakers, Oscar Micheaux, made 40 films. Only 8 survive, right? So, and there were a lot of other filmmakers Native Americans were making films, not only documentaries documenting their own lives, but also feature films. Those are, the necessity to save those and films by other minority filmmakers, avant-garde films, newsreels, industrials. It just tells a fuller picture of the American story and the necessity. I mean, I thank the Copyright Alliance. Thank you, Maribel, for allowing me to sort of proselytize this preservation story, but it's an important one. And it's not, just a couple of old silent films that are worth saving because a handful of people think that they're interesting, artworks. It's a continuing story today in 2024, both to save our history and tell a fuller story, but also going forward to make sure, because a lot of independent filmmakers don't have the wherewithal to save it. And if they think they're just, saving a digital file, it's true in music as well. I'm sure Taura could tell horror stories about, files being lost, not her own, I hope, but, the separation masters of recorded music that are necessary to save. So you have the drum and the bass and the guitar tracks. I mean, these are all important cultural artifacts and are worth saving. So that would be the necessity to do that and to make the case for that. And the work's being done. It's not just the Film Preservation Foundation. Martin Scorsese formed the Film Foundation also about 30 years ago. And puts a lot of money and a lot of time and effort with other directors. As I said, the major archives, Library of Congress, UCLA, Eastman, MoMA, the Academy are all doing a lot of this work too, and not just feature film with major studios, but a lot of these other filmmakers that are equally important, and their stories are being told. And some of these films are resurfacing and retelling sort of different story than what people remember of whatever era we're talking about. And that'll be true 20, 30, and 50 years from now as well. So that's the importance of the preservation of the material. I was speaking of film, but it's also true in the other areas of copyright as well. Thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists today. I want to get to a few questions if possible. So Nicholas Batista asks, I am a screenwriter with a significant body of work, and I would like to, soon AI will allow me to feed a screenplay into a computer and it will generate a photorealistic feature film. Is that film copyrightable? Can I register my copyright even though it was produced by an artificial intelligence? Who wants to answer that?
Mary, or Mary, you want to go?
No, go ahead, Eric, and then.
I was simply going to say, so the Copyright Office has rejected wholly created AI materials, looking to the courts and to the Constitution of the requirement for human authorship, human originality. So the purely AI generated has been rejected, and the courts so far have upheld the Copyright Office's decision. The questions that are going to become a lot more complicated are going to be the mixture of some human authorship, some AI generated material, and at least the Copyright Office's position, they give examples, is you have to disclaim the AI generated material. But it's a little bit like unscrambling an egg. I'm not sure how exactly that's going to be done. Mary, I'll let you answer that.
Sure, it's actually a great question, and I think what the participant is asking is it, if you have if you put your own work, your own screenplay into a film generator, that screenplay is still protected. So what the AI generates, the film itself would not be protected, but to the extent that is a sort of a derivative work of your screenplay, it's covered. So, I think it actually is, copyright lawyers are used to teasing these things apart because we have these doctrines of derivative works and look at things for substantial similarity. So what would be protected is, the characters, the dialogue, whatever is in the screenplay that also appears in the film is still protectable. But you have to disclose the audiovisual aspects and the other aspects that the human did not create.
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for those answers. Another quick question: what is world copyright protection? Says Bakul Banerjee.
World copyright protection. I think what that would refer to, or Bijou, do you want to take it? Is the international, say we have an international
Oh,
system.
no, sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Bijou.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Well, world copyright is copyright is our national laws, right? But all but a couple countries in the world belong to treaties. Many belong to what's called the Berne Convention, and under those treaties, we have something called national treatment. So a work created by the national of another country or in another country is treated like a U.S. work for purposes of infringement and use in the US and vice versa. So I don't know if that helps. I'm sure Eric has spent a lot of his career doing international copyright, and Bijou, so have you.
I don't think that answers it. I mean,
Yeah.
if you create a work at the moment of what the international laws refer, and there aren't international laws, there's national laws, as Mary said, and then they're interconnected because countries join treaties. And the treaties generally say all you have to do is create your work, and then it'll be protected in all of the other treaty parties. The details are found in the national laws. So, what rights, remedies you have in France are found under French law for a work created in the US or in France.
Thank you for that. This is a really interesting question also regarding the theft of copyrighted works. Isn't that a federal criminal offense, a felony under copyright law? I know the FBI prosecutes a lot of IP crime. Why isn't it prosecuting the crimes Mrs. Rasenberger has described?
So there is criminal copyright infringement, definitely. Not all infringement rises to that level. It has to be intentional, willful, and have a certain amount of harm. So somebody posting an infringing photo on their website, that is not going to be criminally prosecuted, but large-scale commercial piracy is. So, and we do see the US government prosecuting that kind of piracy, not, I would say, enough. So it's the Justice Department, the local US attorneys who have to bring these, and they have limited resources, and often they're looking at things like all kinds of threats to US terrorism, whatever. So, but we have worked with the US government successfully to bring down pirate ebook sites.
That's good to know. Nancy Garcia wants to know, and this question is for Bijou. Hardware recycling is not the answer. This is what she says. This has been proven recently by the Apple fiasco. Repairability is much more effective. How are electronics companies being held accountable for repairability and access to parts by consumers?
So I will say that recycling is certainly part of the answer in terms of sustainability. Repairability for video game consoles, and video game consoles are not the same as general purpose consumer electronics like your phone. So video game consoles are made to play video games, which are copyright protected works. And so that's why their security is paramount, because in order to not have video game piracy, we make sure that our consoles are protected. Now, our members certainly have programs for repairability of your consoles. If a console is malfunctioning, you can send them in. If it's out of warranty, your console maker will certainly help fix it if it's fixable. And I think even iFixit has rated the repairability of consoles for the most part, has given them a high score. Most of your consoles can be repaired relatively easily. but there are obviously exceptions where it really needs to be repaired. Even the Copyright Office did grant in the last rulemaking a very narrow exemption for the repair of video game consoles, and that was to replace your optical disk drive. So if you had to disable the technological measures that protect your optical disk drive, you can do that, but in order to take advantage of the exemption, you have to put it back with all the technological measures. And why is that exemption so narrow? It's narrow because of the concern about piracy and access to infringing games, which is not what we want, because that does not serve the developers and the creators that bring you your games.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you, everybody who attended. Thank you for all of your wonderful questions, for your comments. We are glad that this was helpful. This is recorded, and I believe it will be shared to those people who registered but were not able to attend live. I want to thank all of our panelists, of course, the Copyright Alliance, all of the partners and volunteers who helped make this happen, Miriam Lord. Thank you, everyone. And just, one last thing, if you want to know what else you can do about all of the things that are happening with AI and stay abreast about the latest, make sure you follow the Copyright Alliance, sign up for their newsletter, and write to your legislators, okay? Get involved and stay on top of things that way. Ask them to help keep AI companies responsible and not put that onus on the consumers or the creators. So thank you again. My name is Maribel Quezada Smith. This was a pleasure, and we will see you again hopefully soon.